morning. It is my pleasure to be in front of the committee on behalf of the Council of Canadian Innovators. And I'd like to thank all of you for your time and commitment during this public health and economic crisis in ensuring that Ontarians are protected from the impacts of COVID-19. The last time I was here was following the release of Ontario's 2019 budget. Since then, our economy and the global networks that facilitate trade and commerce has changed dramatically. COVID-19 has taken a shocking hit to Canada's economy by shuttering business operations, halting trade and travel, and forcing governments to spend money they had never budgeted for so that citizens across Canada could financially survive the pandemic. At the Council of Canadian Innovators, we work closely with Canada's fastest growing businesses and technology companies. A large percentage of our membership calls Ontario home, and all of our members are Canadian headquartered. We have a unique vantage point into their challenges navigating the pandemic, keeping employees on payroll, accessing new customers, and charting global expansion. At the height of the pandemic, valuation of Canada's tech sector had dropped by 50%. Investment in R&D was down 75%, and over 40% of companies had curtailed their global plans to expand. On average, Ontario scaling tech companies shed 10% of their workforce before the federal wage subsidy program was introduced. However, Ontario's tech firms did not stop working during the pandemic. Education technology companies, remote work companies, digital health companies, cybersecurity companies, the list goes on that worked overtime during the pandemic to keep our hospitals, small businesses, schools, and entrepreneurs all running as we shifted online and stayed home. Today, tech companies are hiring again, and while investment has slowed significantly, there is optimism among innovators that investment will return. To maintain this momentum, innovators look to see a strong roadmap for economic recovery from their government. A meaningful recovery should not aim to recoup the economic losses, but also position Ontario for success in the global economy that awaits us on the other side of the pandemic. For that, we need a new set of policy strategies and tools focused on enabling job and prosperity engines, specifically Ontario's homegrown technology companies, to scale globally. For years, innovation experts have said that one essential element for sustained regional growth in the presence of significant concentration of scale-up companies. These companies are innovative high-growth businesses whose ability to scale from millions to billions provides lucrative returns to national economies. I've spoken about this in previous presentations to the committee, but as Ontario prepares to rebuild, it is more important than ever that this policy is focused on in the building up of Ontario's scaling companies. Without a strong base of domestic high-growth companies in Ontario, the government will not have the critical public wealth necessary to pay down provincial deficits incurred during the pandemic and rebuild the economy. I appear today with our plan to rebuild Ontario's economy, but also reorientate our economic thinking towards the new potential of a post-COVID economy driven by innovation. I'll speak to one of the key recommendations captured in our document I have shared with the clerk, entitled A Plan for Economic Recovery and Reorientation: How Canada Can Achieve Post-Pandemic Prosperity. The Ontario government must become a large purchaser of made in Ontario products and digital services to improve government supply chain resiliency, especially in the healthcare sector. In the early days of the pandemic, as US President Trump temporarily prevented 3M from exporting N95 masks to Canada, Premier Ford said, "Never again in the history of Canada should we ever be beholden to companies around the world or countries around the world for the safety and well-being of the people of Canada." Later, he would encourage Ontarians to buy local because, in his words, that's how we support our neighbors, our friends, and our families. It's important to codify these sentiments in Ontario's economic recovery plans. Local wealth creation is important because the taxes domestic companies pay on their revenue are reinvested by government into the important social and infrastructure programs all businesses use and Canadians care about. But the government of Ontario needs to take further steps to support businesses during the recovery. We were pleased to see the Ontario government introduce the COVID-19 related procurement portal in the early weeks of the pandemic. This exercise helped expose the government to new vendors and helped reframe the public-private dialogue regarding procurement and supply in Ontario. Procurement should be seen as an economic driver. The government of Ontario should utilize its massive buying power to drive economic growth and enhance supply chains resiliency for economic regrowth. An Ontario firm having the provincial government as a purchaser of domestic goods and services is considered a major validator for the company to accelerate future sales with other governments. Nowhere is this more critical than in the healthcare space. At a recent visit to a medical innovation centre in Waterloo, Premier Ford remarked that Ontario's healthcare and medical devices companies face an uphill battle having their products and digital services approved for in Ontario. We need to buy Ontario intelligence, Ontario technology, he said. It's clear we need to support these companies. Therefore, Ontario's recovery plan needs a domestic healthcare strategy focused on increasing the adoption of innovation, focused on improving patient outcomes. This is how we strengthen our supply chains to be more resilient for future pandemics. The Ontario government must work with domestic innovators to determine how best to leverage existing healthcare needs and to also help with remote patient care and encourage the use of digital platforms. New billing codes should be created for testing non-standard solutions for clinical trial activities for new innovative medical devices. The government should create procurement processes for provincial vendors on innovation health solutions and increase innovation in hospitals. Yes, Ontario's post-pandemic recovery must focus on boosting employment, stimulating growth, and containing the deficit, but it also must be bold in seizing this rare opportunity to develop a prosperity strategy from the ground up through supporting Ontario's fastest growing companies in all sectors by modernizing policies for the 21st century economy. This strategy requires a whole of government approach. I thank you for giving me this time and for your questions.